if you look up the average compensation of a realtor in the state of Utah, I think it's less than $40,000 a year. People just do the same things. Like, oh, I'll get my license. I'll do TikToks. Sure. I'll be on Instagram. I'll be the whatever their brand is.
What does someone need to do in order to do well?
NAR Lawsuit is it's got to be documented. You have to have a buyer broker. You have to have some sort of agreement before you start showing people houses.
How do you choose a good broker?
Drew, welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming over, taking time out of your weekend. It is a Saturday, so I appreciate you coming, and I know you're a busy man, and especially being on this podcast. So Where to Get Started podcast, we're here to just know about you and how you got started in your field, essentially. So a little bit about you from what I know, and then you can kind of fill in some blanks. Yeah. We got in contact through Zillow. We were looking, my wife and I, we were looking at a single family home. And we were interested in this house, and we thought, hey, let's check it out. We want to walk through. We called them, and we got you. And you call us back, and you're like, hey, let's do this. Let's do this, guys.
It was fate.
It was.
That's how it works.
And then, so you do that, and then I know also you own a company. Mm-hmm. You have a ton of experience in the sales and marketing field, specifically for like home builders, real estate, and all this other stuff. So, I'll start off the question. Either one, you fill the blanks on anything you want to add in on your experience, but then also two, how did you get into this? Like how was your interest into like homes and real estate and home building?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. I grew up in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. I actually through high school and college, I worked at a private country club. And, worked my way up. So when I graduated, I went on full time there, and I was a director of operations at a private golf course country club. Mm-hmm. Kind of got interested in real estate through that. I had a lot of Milwaukee Brewers players would come in and want to be members for the season, and I would just help them find places to live.
Oh, okay.
So
that's
we were kind of, I wasn't licensed. I was just calling people that had their houses on the market, seeing if they wanted to rent them for 6 months.
Yeah.
And worked with some of the players that way. So that was kind of how I first got interested in it.
Sure.
Moved out to Utah about 11 years ago and jumped right back into hospitality. Was working at Montage Deer Valley, which I have all kinds of crazy stories of him and Kanye and all the people that stayed there.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, did that for a while. And actually just walked into a Edge model home when I lived in Heber, and I was working at Montage. I ended up at Montage for about 4 months because I just sent a resume into Edge, and they had just been, I guess, at a conference where they were just talking about how to hire good people for real estate sales. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about hiring from hospitality because you're used to working hours, long hours, weekends, and not making a ton of money. And so,
interesting.
Sent my resume in. And the other thing is, like, people in hospitality generally are comfortable talking to people.
Yeah,
so you have somebody come up to you at the desk or wherever you are. Yeah. So, sent in a resume there, got hired. Didn't have my real estate license at the time, and so I got my license in about 3 weeks and started working for Edge from there. And I spent 8.5 years there. Was a sales agent for 2, and then moved into management and ended up running sales and marketing and design for Edge for 6 years or so. So kind of in various roles. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You said 3 weeks? Is that typical?
It's doable. It's not typical.
Okay.
So licensing, you've got to do 120 hours. And you do it, most people do it all online. You can do up to 8 hours a day. And so,
is that like hours of like studying or like hands-on? Like what is, when you say hours,
I'm actually
like,
not even
entail?
sure what it takes to get a realtor's license.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's, kind of online education. So you're watching like different videos on different topics, and then you take a quiz and you pass like 2 hours worth, and you kind of just go through. Stringham is a company that does a lot of it. Prado is another one. There's a few companies out there that do it. And so you just sit and watch the videos or listen to the videos and then kind of check them off as you go. So
interesting.
Yeah. So about 120 hours and then take a test. I had to go up to Pocatello to take my test because I couldn't get in here anytime soon. So yeah.
Is it because the classes were booked at full, or
like the testing centers were crazy. So there's
I was
one
gonna
in
say, like,
Draper.
what year was this? What this was?
This would have been early 2014.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is the housing market in Utah was
Yeah.
still just like
Yeah, everybody was getting their
Yeah, doing
license.
going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to Pocatello and took it and got my license there, and then did the Edge thing, and then just started with the Perry Group about a year ago.
Is there any issue? So you went to Pocatello, which is in Idaho,
Mhm.
right? And then so if like you getting licensed in Idaho, and then like, is there any issues going from Idaho to Utah, or is it easily transferable? Like, what is that?
Yeah, the testing centers in, I think it's Idaho and Nevada, it's like a reciprocal thing. So they run the Utah test, but you can
Oh.
go there to take it.
Oh.
Got it.
That's, it's Pearson
More
V
like
testing.
More like
We
a
do most of
testing
them.
center, but then they test you based on the state.
Yep.
Because like the licensure you have to get on a per state basis,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yep. And then you've got to get your fingerprints done and pay all the fees and stuff once you pass and actually get a license. So,
Interesting. Okay. So you got into the real estate. You worked your way up through the corporate, if you will. What was it you were focusing on while you were doing the corporate world? What was your specialty in that space? What were you doing there?
So I moved. I was a sales agent, and then partway through my second year selling, they asked me if I would move into kind of a director of sales position.
Mm-hmm.
We had another director of sales at the time, so there was going to be the two of us. And then a few months in, they kind of asked him to step out and ask me to take the whole team. So I moved in, took the whole team, and then moved up to a VP of sales position, and then took on the marketing department after that, and then took on design after that. So I would say I probably spent 75% of my time at least in the sales operation.
Yeah.
Because I moved into that in 2016
Mm-hmm.
and then was there through 2022. So it's kind of the crazy as the market got crazy.
Oh yeah. Very crazy during that time here.
So we did, the first year I was in management, we did about 900 homes. And then like 4 years later, we did about 1,800.
So
crazy.
what was it that appealed to you of moving into the management space as opposed to staying as like the agent?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, it was, I wanted to be have a little bit more control.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of opportunities where we could improve and just communication and strategy and different stuff. And so a big part of it was just having some control over like the day-to-day operation. And instead of being told like, hey, this is how we're releasing this, or this is when we're releasing it, to actually be able to help with that.
Mm-hmm.
My first management job, I was a locker room attendant at a golf course, and I was managing like 3 of my classmates.
Okay. Okay.
And I went to a really small school, so it was really awkward.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah.
3 of my 5 classmates. I was their boss for the summer.
Got it.
It was awesome.
That would be weird.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Yeah.
And so I had always kind of done management, so that was part of it. And then I think I wanted to start a family, and it was really hard, just the timing of, you don't know when you have to go show a house, and
Sure.
you don't know when your next paycheck is and things like that. And so it was probably more so wanting the control, but also just wanting some predictability over my life.
Sure.
And still working a ton of hours, but kind of being able to do it from home when I needed to, or things like that. So more honestly, like having some control and then just quality of life.
Got it. Now, even as an agent though, like, did you ever do as an agent, like, non-associated to any sort of builder? Did you do any period of time like that doing real estate just like on your own?
Yeah. So I started with the builder and then did management. So it's really been the last little over a year that I moved into kind of the resale world.
Yeah.
That's where I've started working with the Perry Group, and they're massive partners with Zillow, and buy Zillow leads and things like that. Right. Moved into kind of the resale side of it that way. I got my broker's license as well while I was at Edge.
Okay.
Which that process is a little bit different. There's education you have to do very similar to getting your real estate license.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to have a lot of experience with transactions. So, and I did it during COVID. So their whole staff was like working from home. I had to print off like 50 contracts that I had done and literally mail them to someone's house who worked at the division of real estate.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
geez.
Okay.
But so you have to have experience points, and they can be in property management. Like a commercial transaction is worth X number of points. A residential transaction is worth X number of points. And you've got to have enough of those to prove to them you've actually done real estate to get a broker's license. So I did that as well when I was at Edge.
Why would someone need a brokerage license and a real estate license?
Yeah. So
Maybe a dumb question, but
no. So
we're dumb though.
we are dumb. We're yeah.
So we ask
We have
dumb
no
questions
idea.
because we're dumb.
yeah. No, there's a lot of places where it's kind of used interchangeably. Like you go to New York and everybody calls himself a broker, and like there's different criteria kind of by state of what they are and what they refer to themselves as. In Utah, if you want to like run an office or run a team and be the official broker, you're responsible for like compliance and all the legal stuff that goes along with each individual that's under you. So every realtor or sales agent that's licensed has to be under a broker. So you can't be completely independent. You have to be at a brokerage. So like Keller Williams is a brokerage.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Each Keller Williams office will have a broker or more than one, associate brokers, things like that.
Yeah.
So everybody, once you get a license, you actually have to go hang it at a brokerage. And that is, again, Keller Williams, Remax. We're at a brokerage called Real, which is a nationwide brokerage.
Sure.
So in our world now, I am a broker. I'm not acting as a broker. So I have my license, but I don't actively use it.
Right.
Okay.
So we're under Real, and we have a broker in the state of Utah with Real. All of our licenses fall under that person. And then the Perry Group is just a team that everybody at the Perry Group is under that broker.
Got it.
So we're not a brokerage ourselves. We're just a team.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. I'm curious to know a little bit about like the differences you saw between working as a agent within like a builder versus like being an agent separate and kind of independent from those. Like, what are like the pros and cons you see from either one of those? And
Yeah,
if you were
for
to be
sure.
like, oh, hey, if you like this sort of thing, I would suggest this if you could do it.
Yeah. I think I would, in general, and every builder's kind of different in how they compensate, and some builders, their agents are employees, some they're independent contractors, or model homes, drive people to the website.
Right.
And so it's a lot easier to find business. And when I got my license, I went and met with Keller Williams in Park City, other brokerages, and it doesn't really cost a broker anything to have you in their brokerage.
Yeah. They're like, come and join us. Sure. Yeah. We'll put your name on the list.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, if you sell something, we get a percentage of it. If you never sell anything,
we don't care. Right?
We don't care.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
And different brokerages provide more training and more support, and they typically take a larger split or percentage of your commission if they do that.
Okay.
So everybody kind of has their own model, but I would say you're not out there. You're not having to call your friends and family. Yeah. I was new. I mean, when I got my license, I'd been in the state of Utah for like 5 months.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I had nobody to call.
Yeah.
I don't have friends or SOI that I can call and find deals. So
sorry, SOI, you mean
sphere of influence.
Oh yeah,
so,
okay, got it. Okay.
Oh,
The sphere of
yeah.
influence, yeah.
So I didn't have anywhere to go to find business.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like it was kind of my only option. I got my license because I had already been essentially hired and told, okay, here's your start date. You better have a license by then. So
Got it.
it's in general, you are compensated less by builders than doing it on your own because they're doing so much of the marketing for you.
That makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah. And providing all the inventory for you and things like that. So in general, you're compensated less. And they all vary, but where I was at Edge was probably the most favorable to their agents in terms of compensation. And so,
okay, well, taking that and going to the other side real quick, Colton, if you had a question, I'm going to just do this one because it's like a good follow-up, I think. How do you choose a good broker if you decide to go through that way? Like, what is it that you want to look for to be like, oh, this is a broker that, like, good versus bad?
Yeah.
Not necessarily naming names, but like, what is the criteria that you're going to be like, how you evaluate a broker to be like whether or not?
I think on top of that, that was actually going to be my
same
thought. So,
okay, yeah. It's a great question if you were thinking it.
But also, like, what do you look for? But then when you're in conversation with them, what do you ask to try to extract the information to know or guarantee that working for them is a good idea?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, like, when they get their license, it's natural, I think, to be like, I don't want to give my commissions away. So I'm going to find the brokerage that charges me the least money. Right. I think that tends to be the wrong approach if you're brand new in the business. Because those tend to be the brokerages that if you're a seasoned agent and you don't need much, you just need to be under a broker and you need them to handle your paperwork and help pay your commissions out and keep you compliant.
Just like housekeeping stuff.
Yeah. The more seasoned agents go there, and there's brokerages they charge you $500 a transaction.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people when they first get their license think, oh yeah, that's the cheapest. Like I'm going to go broke trying to do real estate. So I better keep as much as I can.
Sure.
But those brokerages tend to not provide as much support. And so I personally think
support in like material given to you or like what?
Yeah, I think marketing support, training. I think to me the biggest one is leads.
Yeah.
And that's, where I'm at the Perry Group, plus we have realtor.com leads and we do different things to bring leads in. You're not going to get rich on every transaction, but your phone's going to ring.
Yeah.
So I think like where I'm at Colton was my phone rang and it rang out to 10 realtors all at once. And I was the first one to pick up.
Yeah.
And it's competitive, but it's real and you get at bats. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you have a huge, I've seen agents that get their license and they came from Vivint and they know everybody in the Valley and they have people all across the country they know that want to buy investments.
Yeah.
Like if you have that, I think you can make your way at a lower compensating brokerage because you have deals you can go find.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like where you're at in life, you have friends that are buying houses, or in my case, I knew like 2 people in the state.
Right.
Because I'd worked with them at Montage that might buy a house.
Right.
If you don't have that, I think the questions I would be asking are, do you provide leads? How many? What's the process? What does it look like? And I think you've got to go into it knowing you're going to give away a larger chunk of your commission, but in the alternative route, you might go to a $500 a transaction brokerage and you might never have a transaction. So it really doesn't matter.
Right. A high percentage of zero is still zero.
Sure.
Right.
So I think training, I would always want to meet with the broker and know who the person is that if I have a problem or a question I can go to and make sure that jives. But I think training and really as you're getting into the business, I think leads is a big question. And again, unless you think you already have a bunch of people in your back pocket that are ready to buy houses.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So if someone were to be watching this or listening, like, is it more difficult to chase after commercial or real estate, like, or residential? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is it like, would you recommend one or the other? I think I only know you as the residential portion. I don't know how experienced you are in the commercial realm, but like, are there similarities? Are there things that people can try to figure out and deduce like, oh yeah, I want to go more commercial rather than residential?
Yeah, I think we just had a guy join our team that used to do commercial, and I think right now I would say there's a lot of challenges in trying to get into commercial. And if you drive around town, you see all the buildings that have for lease signs on them. There's kind of I would probably say the same thing. Like if you know people that own commercial buildings and you think you can help them, it would be an easier way to enter. If you're just like, hey, I like office space, I want to lease it. There's some machines of individuals and companies out here that have just kind of like, they're the ones that get the call when somebody needs a sublease or whatever. So, and I think honestly, like COVID changed that a lot. There's a lot of vacant spaces. There's a lot of buildings that were approved or under construction that are now sitting vacant.
And businesses suffered quite a bit too. I think some of them too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think to me, residential is the easier one to get into, and it's super competitive. It seems like everybody, I think the first time you and I talked, you had a friend or family member that had a license.
Yeah.
There's so many licensed people out there that's hard to stand out. And so, again, I think that's why if I had a little brother that wanted to do real estate, I'd say get your license and get on with a builder and get some at bats, or get on with a team that provides you leads. Because once you have some leads and you start to have some closings, you can start to build your SOI. You can start to get referrals from those people. You can kind of start to build a business, but to just like get your license, hang it at a brokerage, and then go sit at your house and try to figure out what's next is really hard. So, yeah, I think to me, commercial is a hard one to break into, especially out here.
when you think about the kind of like the leads and like the next steps, right? We're saying, if you're at the builder, that's great. You have that pipeline that they're giving to you. But when you're on your own, you're thinking about, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like, what would be your advice? Let's say, okay, you get with a brokerage, and sure, they can give you some leads, but it's like, okay, well, you still don't want to like sit on your hands, right?
Yeah.
And last I checked, putting your face on like a one of those bench buses doesn't work anymore.
People still try it though.
I've seen it. I've seen it. And most of them are out there, and they're still like look like they've been completely worn out, and it's probably a guy who's already got rid of it. What would you say were like the biggest lessons you pulled from working for the builder as an agent, or even just working for the builder in general, from in terms of like the real estate market?
Yeah, I mean one really hard part, I guess, depending where you are and who the builder is and what they have available to sell.
Mm-hmm.
When you work in any real estate, you get paid when the house closes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go work for a builder that doesn't have anything built and available to sell,
Sure,
you're not getting paid anytime soon.
Right.
Sure.
So for me, we had a lot of quick move-in homes that were completed or nearly completed, and I didn't let anybody leave my model home without making sure they knew that I had those.
Right.
And so I think that's a piece of it. It does take a long time to get it going,
Mm-hmm.
potentially, depending where you are and what inventory is available. And that would be a question I would ask, honestly, if I started with a builder today, would be like, what do you have coming up that's available to buy?
Yeah.
And if it's, we don't have any quick move-ins. We have stuff under construction here that'll be done in April.
Yeah.
It's going to be April before you have a paycheck. So I would say that's probably a big lesson, and people underestimate that and think, oh, I'll just come in and just sell a bunch of stuff right away and I'll be fine.
Because they're builders. Clearly they have
Yeah.
an inventory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And more, I think most of them do. And it's a little harder to get in. But I would say that's a big one of just understanding when your paycheck is actually going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't sell something today, like that paycheck just moved out another day.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest lesson, I guess. And then I don't know, but it's a great business, but there are, I would say you don't have a ton of control. I mentioned control as a reason I wanted to move into management. You think about a typical resale transaction.
Mm-hmm.
You go under contract, you're going to have an inspection, you're going to have an appraisal, you're going to have a title company help you close it, you're going to have a lender. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
You work in new construction, you have, I used to tell people, like, it's like you have a paycheck, like you put under contract, there's a paycheck there. It will be signed the day it's closed, but we have to hand that paycheck to so many people through that process in new construction. So your designers involved, you've got architects involved, you got your construction managers involved, you have your drywallers involved. Like if any one of those people does something that the buyer doesn't like enough, your paycheck just gets ripped up. And so that's kind of like one of you don't have a ton of control over that process. We did a study at one point of how many different hands actually touched homes that were built. And I think between people on the back end in these vendors' offices and like physically drywallers, framers, roofers, it's like over 1,000 people actually touch each house throughout the process.
Either physically or tangentially, like through paperwork or some fashion, right?
Yeah. And so there's so many different things that can go wrong that a buyer might just say, hey, I'm out. I'm going to go find something that is already built because I don't want to do this. So
that brings me to my next thought here. And of course, you don't have to name any names. We're not asking you to, but what is the most things that has gone wrong that you've seen?
During a transaction?
Oh, you know what? I just say generally, and you tell me whatever the first thing that came to your mind was that you're like, because that's probably the worst experience.
I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, okay. You don't have to. Maybe the second worst thing that's happened. Then, if it's not the first.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's things that are just like emotionally hard as an agent.
Oh, okay.
Where, you go through the whole process, and it might be from contract to close. It might be 12 months, and 11 months in, the guy loses his job and can't close on the house, and you're just done. And So I think that's probably the most common. Typically, like on our team now, or when I was at Edge, you have probably 20 to 25% of your contracts that go under contract cancel. And so the emotion of that is really hard. Yeah. So I would say that, and I think just the COVID was really hard.
Oh,
say
sure.
That.
Yeah.
You couldn't get materials, and so you just had houses sitting. Couldn't get windows. You couldn't, like, there was a fire at like a paint factory in Texas. You couldn't get certain sheets of paint for a while. It was a mess with just supply chain stuff. So
yeah,
I would say that, and as an agent, and even like in there's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
right? Like we had at one point you couldn't get appliances, and we had an employee's dad who lived in Kentucky that like drove a trailer
full of
appliances out,
stoves and like refrigerators in the back of a U-Haul, basically.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the biggest. I mean, obviously there's like, you hear horror stories about construction, and I think the hard part again is like, it's not an assembly line. Like we aren't building these in factories. There's weather. Right. You have houses that flood because a water line broke over a weekend.
Yeah.
It's supposed to close on Monday, and
it's full. They got 2 inches in the basement or something.
Yeah. So things like that, where it's just, it's one of the last truly like man-made things where you just like things go wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How would someone? This isn't necessarily specific to someone that wants to be a real estate agent or work for a home builder, but for just an average consumer or someone that wants to buy a house and they want to work with a real estate agent, what are some things that they should be aware of, or questions that they ask to know that like this guy or girl knows what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, or they seem kind of sketchy, or like what are some like things that people should be aware of in order to really vet their agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would for sure interview multiple agents, and there's a lot of ways to do that. Look at the shopping carts and call that person, or the benches and call that person.
Yeah, there you
go. But I would probably interview people, and I think it is experience, and making sure they've been there before. And I think it's hard. We teach our agents who are brand new, like, rely on the team. You can't sell that you've done this before. You've never sold a house before.
Right.
But
Sure.
we have 140 agents, and we've sold a lot of houses, and we're there to support you. So I think understanding, have they done it before? Do you just personally like them? Like, there's realtors that do a lot of business, and you're not going to jive with every person.
Right.
So making sure they have time to actually help you. And then I think one of the big new things really is with the National Association of Realtors had a lawsuit over compensation.
Oh, right.
That's now a question of, in a nutshell, in the past, sellers paid a listing agent to list their property and paid a buyer's agent to bring them a buyer.
Yeah.
That has all shifted now to where sellers aren't obligated to do that. They never were obligated, but they are less tied to paying both sides. And so I would say when interviewing a buyer's agent, ask what they charge. So a great, like, typical buyer's agent is going to charge 3%. The hope now is that the seller will still pay that, but it's not a guarantee. So that's a conversation that I would have with every buyer's agent right now to say, hey, okay, I owe you 3% to buy a house with you. That's what your services cost.
Yeah.
What happens if the seller isn't willing to pay that? Am I paying that out of pocket? Is that my closing costs? What do you do? And there's agents out there, same as the brokerages, where they'll charge 1%, but their services are probably not going to be as helpful. They're trying to do it on volume, so they're either really busy, or in some cases they just need a paycheck, and so they're like, I'll do it for 1%.
Sure.
I don't think that's always, there's been studies done of having a buyer's agent, how much you can negotiate off the price, versus not having a buyer's agent, or having a budget buyer's agent or whatever. And so I think having that conversation of what do we do in these scenarios? So You're telling me your fee is 2%. what if the seller doesn't want to pay that? Do I have to pay you that? Will you negotiate that?
Right.
And really part of the NAR lawsuit is it's got to be documented. You have to have a buyer broker. You have to have some sort of agreement before you start showing people houses.
Oh, okay.
And so having that conversation up front is one that I would have for sure.
Yeah, because I always think like you could just look for houses you want to and then get in contact with the seller agent, but that person doesn't represent you. They represent the seller, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I think that in going back to kind of the builder model, and I think sometimes people perceive a agent that works for the builder as sketchy or they're only protecting the builder's interests. And,
Sure, yeah.
I think there's sketchy people in every role everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a different transaction where, in new construction, you're walking into their home. Like they're sitting in there, they have an office.
Sure.
They want to control the whole transaction. And so I would always recommend, and I would even say this when I was at Edge, like we loved buyer's agents. We loved buyers that had agents because they could help facilitate the transaction. And we weren't, as a seller's agent, I wasn't caught in the middle as much. I could work through that agent. So I think everybody should have a buyer's agent, frankly.
All right. So going back to the lawsuit that you mentioned a little bit, how have you seen that impact the overall market or the industry on like either the number of home? I mean, sure, there's other outside factors like how the economy is doing, people losing jobs or whatever it may be, right? But like, what's your point of view on that impact of that compensation structure changing?
Yeah, I think, and it just went into effect about a month ago.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
Yeah,
it's pretty new, right?
Yeah.
At the time of filming this, which is September or something.
September, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say we haven't seen massive changes yet. It has, in my mind, it's been beneficial in the realtor community because rather than just scheduling online a time to go see a house, you actually pick up the phone and call the listing agent and say, hey, tell me about the house. What compensation are you offering buyer's agents? And you actually have that conversation up front. I think one of the challenges that when everybody kind of knew it would happen is people are now, if I was to list my house now, I would look at comps in my neighborhood and what things around me sold for a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Sure.
People are trying to list at the same price as something that sold 2 months ago, but they are not willing to pay the commission. And so now you've got buyers that are the house is effectively overpriced once they have to add their agent's commission on top of that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And the market really isn't supporting that today. So interest rates are coming down. But I would say overall there hasn't been a massive change to it. Most sellers are still offering to pay a buyer's agent just because they know a typical buyer's agent, like if you call 5 listings that you want to go see and one of them says, I'm not paying your commission, that's probably number 5 on your list
of ones you're going to show.
Yeah. And you'll still show it. You'll still, if the buyer wants it, you'll still do it, but you have to negotiate with your buyer. And so it's just it's changed that dynamic a little bit where some sellers are thinking, oh, okay, cool, I get to keep the 3%. Realtors aren't going to promote those properties as much. So if I was going to send Colton a list of properties that I thought he might be interested in, I may still include it, but it's not going to be my favorite choice.
Right.
Sure.
And it's not going to be Colton's favorite choice either because he's going to have to pay me out of his pocket. So I think we're still showing all those properties. We will still help our buyers through those transactions. Like that, none of that has changed. People aren't getting just like, blackballed where their properties aren't being shown.
Right.
Sure.
But it does make for a more challenging dynamic with your client to say like, hey, this property's awesome. You love it. We have a buyer broker that says you owe me 3%. The seller is willing to pay nothing. So now you owe me 3%.
That's crazy.
How do we do this? So that's the biggest shift. And I think the unfortunate thing, I mean, there's 2 sides to it, right? But I think the unfortunate thing is it's not really helping affordability for that reason. People are pricing their house off of things that sold by them recently.
Right.
So
including the 3%, they're pricing it at that place.
Yeah. So somebody wants to buy that house, they're paying that price, but they're also having to pay a commission now on top of it. So it's not helping affordability. I think the real goal was to be more transparent with commissions and how they're paid and what agents make. And
sure,
if an agent wants to go say, hey, I'll help you buy this house and I'll charge you $500, they can do that. So I think it is giving the transparency that they wanted, but hasn't shaken things up a whole lot yet.
To not get too nitty gritty, but if we think about something, the underbelly of the industry, right? Or like something that maybe you would be like, oh, if you wanted to get into this, things that you should definitely know that maybe someone from the outside doesn't know much about. Like, people see their friends who are maybe in real estate and that are doing really well, and they can see like, oh, there's obviously lots of money in here, or they see things like selling Sunset, and they're like, oh yeah, there's the glamour of these people, and then they have this like outsiders looking in kind of perspective of what the real estate agent or what the real estate industry actually is. So as a person from the inside, talking to somebody on the outside, being like, hey, you should definitely know.
I would say it's probably the 90-10 rule. Like 10% of the agents do 90% of the business.
Yeah.
I think people see the really successful agents and think like, oh, they're overpaid.
Yeah.
And that's a funny thing. I see things all the time in KSL comments of realtors are overpaid.
Yeah.
And I always think like, get your real estate license then. Seems like a great gig if they're overpaid. Like, why don't you do it? I think that's part of the question. It's really, really hard. And if you look up the average compensation of a realtor in the state of Utah, I think it's less than $40,000 a year. If you look at the stats of how long people hold their licenses, within 2 years, it's a crazy number. It's like within 2 years, 80% of people are out of the industry.
Crazy.
And so I think you see the people that kill it and think, oh, it's easy. And like, oh, you sold a $500,000 house and you made 3%, like you made $15,000.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but my brokerage for everything they do for me took this much. And I showed this person 50 houses.
Right. Before they picked this one.
Yeah. And not to mention the gas, but like the time, like I spent 50 hours with this person looking at properties, and then we had to negotiate, and then it almost fell apart. And then we put a contract in and they did cancel. And when you really get down to it, there's a reason that a lot of people have their license to do 1 or 2 deals a year for friends and family and don't do it full time.
Yeah.
So I would say the underbelly it's just really hard. And there's no guarantees. And I think wherever you go, and whether it's a builder or a brokerage or a team that has leads or whatever, none of it's easy. If you want a steady paycheck, don't do real estate. And I think that's more than anything, probably what I would say the underbelly is sure. It looks really glamorous from the outside at times. But I've had people in my office in tears. I've had people, like really emotionally struggling.
Yeah.
Because they don't know where their next paycheck's coming from and they don't know what to do. And I think that's where people just underestimate it because of the TV shows or because of the social media posts or wherever they're getting their information from. They just underestimate how hard it is.
Yeah. What are your thoughts when you see TV shows like Selling Sunset or HGTV, that type of stuff, where they glamorize a lot of it and make it seem really appealing and really easy?
Yeah. I think TV is always TV, whether it's reality TV or not.
Right.
Like I've had friends that were on House Hunters.
Yeah.
And like they owned and lived in the house before they ever filmed the episode. And they go show 2 other houses that are on the market. And then the one that they live in is obviously the one they show them choosing. Yeah.
They bought it 6 months ago. Yeah. That's their dog actually over there.
Yeah. Because they're like covering up the pictures on the wall.
Yeah. It's their family photos.
Yeah. Because the reality of those is like you couldn't film a show where you did all that and then didn't actually win the offer on the house. Right. Like nobody would watch. So I think so many of those are like curated for TV, and it's not, people joke about house hunters, like, whatever. I play Dungeons and Dragons for a living, and my budget is $4.2 million.
Yeah, right.
Like, that's always how those are. No one knows.
I don't know. Where do they get this money? I never know.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that. I do think there are some of the like house flipping shows I think are pretty legit. I think some of the like Ryan Serhant, who was on $1 Million Listing New York and now has his own show. Like, he's legit. They do the amount of business they say they do. Like, it's verifiable.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of the arguments they show are like reenactments or just like, hey, you got to have some drama here.
A little
like,
dramatized.
Yeah, but there's pieces of those shows that's very real.
Yeah.
And so I think it wouldn't be a fun show to watch if it was like, brand new Utah realtors. Like, let's watch them struggle. Let's watch them not know when they're getting a paycheck. This will be like, it's like the Hunger Games.
To sleep again.
Yeah. That wouldn't be fun to watch. So I think that's where, again, like, you watch a show and it's like, oh, he made, and those shows, they always show, right? Like, oh, it was a $12 million house. He made this much in commission. Like, they don't talk about anything else. And those people, I can't go to New York and be Ryan Serhant. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
Never. So it's an unattainable version, I think, a lot of times when they show the true real estate transaction.
Sure.
But they're super entertaining.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of realtors get into them because the ones that are good are really interesting.
Yeah.
And they are real life for those people.
But they are still, like, the reality is they are still like the 1% of the 1%.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these are the.
Yeah. Nobody's ever asked me to do a TV show.
Yeah. Not
for
yet.
the record.
Not yet.
Yeah. Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah.
So I assume that, houses have been around forever, right? And people are always selling houses, how do you stay up on, like, I'm assuming there's new practices, new methods, kind of, on selling homes and what that looks like.
Yeah.
I think social media was probably a big influence on getting people some leads and traction and stuff, right? So how do you stay up on the newest things to do to sell homes?
Just like on your craft, like being honing your craft,
Yeah.
if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, when you have a real estate license, you have to do continuing education.
Right.
And there's classes. And I think there's people have joked, like, when you do that 120 hours, they teach you how to pass the test and how to stay out of jail. And that's pretty much what you get. Like, they don't teach you how to actually sell a house or find a lead. I think, the value of whether it's being on a team with a builder or being on a team under a brokerage or being at a brokerage where people are active. And there's, again, like, you can go to a brokerage and there will be nobody in the office ever.
Right.
Like, their license is there.
Sure.
But they don't interact with each other. I think one of the things we have seen with our team lately, we have 2 offices and 1 office. Our agents don't come into the office very often. And the other office, we made it a requirement for them to be there every day during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton more innovation in the one where everybody has to be there every day. And so I think as far as best practices, like, and we kind of joke down there that, like, we're disrupting the industry because we're doing things different. We're doing a lot of content.
Mm-hmm.
We're pushing door knocking. Like, we're teaching people how to, we'll provide you leads, but we're teaching you how to also go find leads.
Sure.
We created in that office, it's called the Wall of Disruption. And it's literally like, if you do something and it works, like, stick it on the wall.
Yeah.
And then people walk by and they're like, what did you do? Like, you filmed something at a restaurant? Like, how did that help you sell a house?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really getting past what people say they do on social media.
Sure.
And stop listening to Andy Elliott and, like, all these, like, crazy coaches that are like, you got to have a 6-pack if you're going to be successful in this world.
Sell houses, get a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Wake up at 4:30 a.m.
Yes. Yeah. Do your cold plunge and then
there you go.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
All that. You'll be fine. I think it's getting past that and getting into, like, what's working in my market. What's working for someone like me? Like, we have a lot of bilingual agents. Like, what works for them doesn't work for me. I don't speak any other languages.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I can look at what they do, but they're able to access parts of the market I can't access.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to, I think, looking at people that are similar to you, and how they're doing it, and then seeing how you can tweak it. So I think, to me, honing your craft, especially in real estate, is just being around people that are doing it every day and seeing what's working today, because it changes all the time.
What's been one of the most or more rewarding things about staying in real estate?
I think, like, for me, I don't sell a ton of real estate myself. I did for a couple of years and then started managing. So I think for me, it's like, it's seeing the light bulb come on for people and seeing them start to figure it out. And it's, I had an agent that started, and he was like, "Well, I want to start a family. Like, I have to sell." And like, he has a family now. And so seeing that growth of brand new, just got a license, super incredible person, and just like, you just want them to win. I think seeing those people win is the most rewarding to me.
Is there anything that you've experienced in the industry, or anything that you potentially wanted to share with us today that we haven't uncovered through our normal discussion, or something that you thought about that you're like, oh, here's something that I do that I actually find really interesting in my day-to-day work, that maybe is not even specifically directly related to being a realtor, but just like the kind of things that you're doing right now that you're like, okay, here's something I'm into, this is something I'm interested in right now, that we haven't uncovered or we haven't had a chance to talk about yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. I think one of the interesting things that I do and our team does is, like, we're almost like a tech company that sells real estate. Like, we are so into the data. And I think the way, even just in like even buying leads, like the way Zillow works is by zip code, and they have a different price in each zip code, and you have an expected number of leads you'll get each month. We analyze that on a super high level that I don't think everybody does. And so if you were even to go buy, kind of go buy your own leads, you'd probably do it for a few months, not get a deal, and be like, I'm out. We are able to kind of analyze everywhere we are and move our money around and do different things that way. I think the other part that's really fun that a lot of realtors have kind of utilized is knowledge of whether it's off-market properties, like the people want to sell them, but they haven't put it on the market, or there's something going on. Like, being a neighborhood expert is, I think, really fun. Where you kind of just know, like, what's coming in the market, and you can call your clients before it's there, or like
things like, hey, they're putting a Chipotle in, kind of thing, or something like what do you like, that sort of stuff? Or
man, some of that stuff. But I think really, like, if you're door knocking and somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm not in the market, but I know, like, our friends one street over are going to put their house on the market in a couple months.
Yeah.
You go talk to those people, you find out, like, they're going to list it. You call your clients, and before it ever hits the market,
you've already done
a deal. So, and then, like, doing things like flips, lots of, we have some agents on our team, including Michael Perry, who's like just brilliant he studies the MLS. Like, he knows when something comes on the market, he knows what the last one sold for. And he does a ton of transactions, but he probably makes as much or more by doing 2 or 3 high-end flips every year of houses where it pops up on the market, and he either knew it was coming, or it pops up on the market, he buys it with partners and goes in and flips it and puts it back on the market a few months later. And so I think there's pieces of real estate that are really fun that way, where you just have access to information before it actually happens, and you can utilize that for yourself too. So
interesting.
Has there been anything that's like really pivotal, or something in your life that has had an impact in your career to get you to where you are now?
That's really deep.
It is. It is.
I don't know.
Yeah, did you lose a leg in a motorcycle?
Yeah, no, that wasn't me.
I see. I looked like you had both of them.
Yeah,
so
I have both of them.
Maybe he's missing a finger.
It was that guy. It was actually really funny. We interviewed him, and my VP of sales interviewed him, and I was like so over interviews, and I was like, hey, if this guy's any good, just bring him up to my office.
Yeah.
And she texts me from downstairs. She's like, he's really good, but you have to come down and meet him. He only has one leg.
Okay.
So I like come down the stairs,
Yeah.
start talking to him, and he starts talking about like, oh yeah, I played pickleball with this guy, and I did this, and I'm looking at my VP like, you didn't think he could do stairs?
He's
did you see him walk in? The guy plays pickleball.
He plays pickleball.
Like,
he's fine.
He's fine.
Yeah. Just set him up.
Yeah. I don't know that there's anything pivotal. I think for me, I would say like when I started in real estate, my back was against the wall. Like I had moved out to Utah, got my license, and I was when we moved here, I was making like $45,000 a year at Montage as a guest reception manager.
Sure.
And I had, Kanye was upset that somebody lost his gold grill for his teeth.
Yeah, and it was
housekeepers
you.
were trying to find it in the sheets,
Oh
and
my gosh.
like all these like it was it's entertaining looking back on it. But it's
Yeah.
like, man, I don't want to be yelled at for dirty bathrobes anymore on like Christmas Day.
Yeah,
Like, this
okay.
isn't fun.
Yeah,
so
That's fair.
I think for me it was more like I didn't have to make incredible money, but like there's a threshold. Like,
Oh, yeah.
the clock was ticking for me of you got to get out of real estate and get a consistent paycheck job. And so I think that was the biggest thing for me immediately was like my first year in real estate, I think I made about 90,000, and I would have made 45 if I'd stayed at the hotel. And then because it's new construction, I started getting paid on stuff. I think the next year I made over 300. And, but I remember like I called my mom because we'd moved out here and it wasn't working. Like I was like, I'm going broke. Like I can only eat so much ramen and drink so much Kool-Aid and like make mac and cheese.
Yeah.
That I think I kind of had to figure it out,
Right.
or I had to get out. And I think that's really the pivotal moment for most people. I would say I've hired some really good agents that would have figured it out, but they didn't believe they would, and they got out. And then I've seen people that have stayed in too long, and like it's not working, and I can't tell them anything else to do. It's just for whatever reason it's not working. And so I think that's probably the only thing I could point to for me was like I had a window of time to try it.
Yeah.
And it was either going to work or it wasn't. And I knew either way, like I'm committed one way or another. If I'm out, I'm out. If I'm in, I'm in. And I wanted to be in. So,
Yeah. No, it definitely sounds like that drive. You really got to have that drive in order to succeed in this industry. One last question for me, and it's a little bit more of it's a lighter question. If you could pick any state to work in and do real estate or work for a home builder or start your own company, like what you're doing now in Utah, but do that in a different state, what state would it be and why?
oh man, I was going to say Utah. I don't know. I probably, for me, it's about opportunity. So I think it's like, I would go to like a Boise, Idaho that's blowing up.
Yeah.
Or I'd go, Denver area where there's been a ton of growth. I think it's, Utah is unique in job market and stability and a lot of different things where like our residents produce a lot more kids than other places. And so there's always a need for homes.
Yeah.
And our people stay in Utah more. It's way more familial. So like people go to one of the state schools a lot and then they stay. So I don't think there's a better place than Utah. If I had to pick one, I'd probably, I would look at growth, to be honest, and where that is. Like selling Sunset would be awesome. Or like $1 million listing. I would love to be like the Malibu realtor, but it's not going to happen. And it's those markets are so hard to tap into and to break into. Right. So I think I would honestly look at you see it almost like probably once a week. You see like here's the fastest growing cities. Like I would pick one of those and go for it.
Yeah. So and it is true that many times in those top 10s, like there's at least one Utah town that's on those.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think now at this point you have an opportunity to plug. So any sort of things that you want to plug.
Oh man.
And it doesn't have to be related to real estate. If you have like another project or
Yeah,
you
let's hear about
know
it.
some sort of underground opportunities or things you're working on that you might want to share.
Nothing illegal here.
Everything, yeah.
It's
anything
got to
you
be
wanna
legal. I don't know. Let me think.
share.
No. Yeah, I'm working on my newest thing is a new company that I've started called Haven.
Okay.
And we're going to go build cabins. So we are kind of identifying in Utah, we're identifying locations. And part of this for me is I love renting a cabin. And just going like out in the middle of nowhere. I have a camper van. I do the same thing in.
Yeah.
And just like being kind of off the grid, but not entirely off the grid.
Yeah, semi off the grid.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of identifying these areas throughout Utah right now where it's advantageous to build cabins, whether it be for investors, for Airbnb, or individuals that want to be able to rent them out for short-term, long-term. There's not really a company. There's not a brand. We talked a lot about Edge today. Like Edge is a brand.
Yeah.
Edge is building 1,500 homes a year. There's not one brand that's doing this. There's a lot of individuals that buy a lot, and then they go find an architect, and then they go find a general contractor.
There's a lot of work they have to do.
Yeah, you got to go all these different places. And frankly, you got to have a lot of money to do it because you have to carry, in most cases, your own construction loans.
Oh, sure.
And pay those while it's being built and things like that. So what we're doing is we are creating a brand that will actually be kind of the one-stop shop for all of that. So
that's awesome.
between my experience in real estate, acquiring land, my experience in design and kind of architecture, marketing, all of that, we will be able to go in, and whether people already own a lot, and there's a lot of those where you drive through some of these neighborhoods, whether it be Park City, Heber, Midway, Eden, even down by the national parks, like you see for sale signs everywhere, and it's all these people see all these people that bought their cabin lot, their escape, and then we're like, this is really hard. I don't know who to call next. And I don't know how to get utilities to it. I don't know how to get approval from the city. We will take it from start to finish where they already own that, or they want us to help them find the piece of ground. We'll go start to finish all the way through that. And the goal is to build obviously what people want. But the goal is to build kind of semi-traditional as well as like mountain modern exterior cabins, and then just really cool, I call it Instagrammable interiors.
Oh, absolutely.
Of just like, you see a lot of these cabins that were built 30 years ago and everything's brown. Like we wanted to look cool. So that's the new thing that we're just kind of getting into, and it'll be off the ground. Hopefully next summer we'll have some stuff under construction awesome. And we'll really be cranking. Cool. So
yeah, that sounds awesome.
It's called Haven.
Haven.
Cool.
Yeah,
my son named it.
So
nice.
Told him, he was playing Minecraft. I was like, hey, if I was going to start a cabin company, what would I call it? And he's like, Brookhaven. I was like, okay.
Oh, all right.
Let's go with Haven.
Let's go with Haven.
Yeah, so it's called Haven.
Nice.
Yep.
No, that's awesome. I think Colt and I will pass this on to all the people that we know that have cabin land. You're right. It is like so unique. It's like
it is
the processes of having to like get everything hooked up is not the same as what you're doing when you're like just building a normal house in a normal neighborhood.
Well, even Bailey and myself, as we drive to go on some family vacation, we see these for sale signs of like 120,000 acres for sale. It's like, how cool would it be just like buy some land, build a cabin, and then we spiral like, well, what do we do? How do we start that?
How to do that.
Like, I don't know. Okay, well, let's not do that.
Yeah, and where we want to focus, I've had opportunities to go do custom home things, and different stuff, and I want to focus really on the attainable cabin lifestyle, like the one that I would live. And not do, a lot of the lots in these places are an acre or more just because of where they are.
Sure.
Love that, but I don't need to build a 6,000 square foot mansion on it for somebody. Like I would rather build an A-frame cabin that they just love going to.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
That's really the dream, is kind of an attainable cabin lifestyle.
No, I love that. Especially for me.
100%.
Can attain it maybe.
Yeah. Call me.
When we get there, we need to talk to Joe.
We already, we got him.
Like even more.
Awesome. Anything else you wanted to plug? Are there any comments, concerns, questions?
That's it.
Okay.
No.
Well, great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Drew, thanks for coming here. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Appreciate taking time out of your day. I feel like I learned a lot of new stuff, and great to have you here.
We'll keep you in touch. If anyone has any questions or wants to buy a house in Utah, call Drew.
Yeah.